The camera shakes as laughter erupts in the hallway. A boy in a tailored blazer shoves Malik hard, his back slamming into the lockers. Phones are out. It's all being filmed. But what the video doesn't show, the moment before the clip cuts, is Malik stepping forward with a calmness that chills. The silence that follows isn't from fear. It's respect. Because what no one knew was that Malik wasn't just another quiet scholarship kid. And when the truth hit the internet, it broke everything. What do you do when the one you mocked becomes the one the world bows to? It started with a chair scraping across a polished cafeteria floor, a screech that made heads turn but didn't stop the laughter. Malik sat alone at the edge of the lunchroom, hunched over his tray, his dark hoodie pulled low over his eyes like a curtain against the world. The tables around him were loud, neon sneakers, designer bags, and legacy students who wore their last names like brands. At Westbrook Academy, legacy meant everything. You didn't just belong, you inherited your place. Malik was the exception. A scholarship kid from the East Side who kept his head down, answered when called on, and never pushed back, no matter how many times someone knocked his books over by accident. Today, though, things escalated. Someone had a camera out. The clip was only 45 seconds long, but it exploded online within hours. It started with Preston Vale, school board chairman's son, lacrosse captain, and serial tormentor, swaggering up to Malik's table with his entourage. He snatched the apple off Malik's tray, took a bite, and tossed the rest on the ground. "You eat like you dress," he said, voice dripping with inherited arrogance. Laughter followed. Malik didn't react. Not even when Brittany, Preston's girlfriend and the queen of social media at Westbrook, raised her phone and whispered, "Watch this." Preston yanked Malik's tray and dumped it across the table. Milk spilled like paint, dripping over Malik's notebook and hands. Still, he said nothing. What came next was filmed from 3 different angles. Preston leaned in and said, "Say something, charity case. Come on, fight me. Bet you don't even know how." And then came the shove. Malik stumbled backward, hitting a chair, his shoulder banging against it with a thud that even the camera caught. That's where the video cut off. Abruptly. No one knew what happened next, until a second video surfaced 2 hours later. That second clip didn't show humiliation. It showed something else entirely. It showed Malik rising, not fast, not like someone angry, but controlled. Eyes locked. Feet planted. He didn't say a word, just moved. The screen erupted into motion as Preston's cocky smirk vanished, replaced with shock. A blur of movement, fast, precise, and Preston was on the ground, gasping, arms curled around his midsection. Malik hadn't thrown a wild punch. He'd executed a clean takedown, something you'd see in a professional MMA match. And then he turned, calmly walking out of the room. Phones recorded. Mouths hung open. Security didn't even get there in time. By that evening, both videos had been stitched together, edited with dramatic music, and posted to TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Scholarship Kid Destroys Rich Bully read one title. Another said, "When Quiet Goes Violent, Westbrook Fight Gone Viral." Millions of views poured in. Influencers commented. Some laughed. Others criticized. But most were stunned. Who was this kid? Where did he learn to move like that? And why was someone like him at a school like Westbrook? The school panicked. Preston's father called for Malik's expulsion. The administration released a vague statement about ongoing investigations. But the damage was done. The clip was everywhere. On the news. On morning talk shows. Even UFC fighters reposted it with captions like, "This kid has real skill." Meanwhile, Malik didn't show up to school the next day. Or the day after. Rumors spread. Was he suspended? Arrested? Hiding? No one could say. But everyone remembered the look on his face in that second video, the silence, the focus, the discipline. It didn't look like rage. It looked like someone who'd been pushed one too many times. And the world began to ask a different question. Maybe this wasn't just a schoolyard fight. Maybe this was the moment someone extraordinary finally stopped staying silent. Malik didn't grow up with marble floors or weekend getaways to Aspen. His world was concrete, rusted fences, and the quiet hum of streetlights buzzing through cracked windows at night. The east side of the city was a place forgotten by time and ignored by developers, where the sirens were more frequent than lullabies and the only thing louder than ambition was the sound of survival. Malik's mother, Liana, worked double shifts at the local ER, her name tag always smudged with ink and sweat. His father, gone before Malik could form a memory. But it wasn't absence that shaped him. It was his grandfather, Russell Tate, a man built from discipline and hard-earned scars, an ex-Marine with a gaze that could stop lies mid-sentence. Russell didn't believe in excuses. He believed in preparation. From the age of 6, Malik was up before sunrise, balancing on cinder blocks in the backyard, throwing shadow punches until his arms shook. Control your breathing, then your body. That's how you control the fight, Russell would say, folding his hands behind his back as Malik gritted his teeth through cold dawn air. They trained in silence. No music. No talking. Only the rhythm of strikes and the hiss of breath. At night, after homework and a single plate of whatever Liana could stretch into dinner, Malik studied old fight tapes, karate, boxing, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. His grandfather didn't teach him to hurt. He taught him to survive, to protect, and most importantly, to never strike first. By middle school, Malik had earned the nickname Ghost. Not because he was invisible, but because no one could ever pin down where he was emotionally. He didn't shout. Didn't argue. He walked away from fights others would dive into. Some kids thought he was scared. They didn't know he was calculating. He watched the world like a puzzle, eyes flicking over threats and weaknesses like a surgeon preparing to cut. Russell taught him more than punches. He taught him patience, the art of restraint, the moral weight of violence. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, he'd say while rewrapping Malik's knuckles after training. Every move leaves a mark. Make sure it's one you can live with. When Malik was 14, he entered an underground youth tournament in the city. No permission slips, no parents, just raw fists and talent. He wore a black hoodie, no name on the roster. He fought 3 times that night. He didn't lose once. Word spread quietly among those who cared to notice, some gym coaches, some fighters looking for raw potential. One tried to recruit him. Russell refused. "His not your product," he snapped. "His my legacy." After that, Malik stopped competing. He kept training, but only in secret. It became a discipline, not a destination. Westbrook Academy came later. A scholarship his mother pushed for after years of scraped honor rolls and placement tests. Malik didn't want to go. "It's not for people like us," he said. But Liana insisted. "You don't let the world decide that," she said, placing the acceptance letter in his hands. "You go there, and you show them they were right to pick you." The first day at Westbrook was a culture shock. Students with last names that opened doors, teachers who asked about legacy donors during parent-teacher meetings, and hallways that echoed with the kind of entitlement Malik had never known. He kept his head down, not out of fear, but because that's what discipline looked like. Preston and his clique noticed him from week 1. Noticed, and targeted. It started subtle. Locker pranks. Food taken. Sneers about his clothes. Malik said nothing. Russell's voice echoed in his mind. Let them talk. Talking isn't fighting. But every day chipped away a little more. And through it all, Malik held his silence like a shield. His grades were flawless. His behavior spotless. He made no friends, drew no attention. But he saw everything. Every lie. Every threat veiled in laughter. Every shove meant to provoke. And he waited. Not for a fight. For a reason. Then came the day of the cafeteria incident, and for the first time, Malik broke protocol. He didn't move with fear or anger. He moved like a man who had trained for this moment his whole life. But what no one watching knew, what the school, the bullies, and even the internet didn't see, was that for Malik, this wasn't the start of anything. It was the culmination. A quiet storm that had been building for years behind a still face and calloused hands. A fight he never wanted, but always knew might come. And when it did, he didn't just fight back. He revealed who he really was. And that truth would ripple far beyond the school that mocked him. It was the kind of Friday that stretched long and slow, the air thick with summer's approach and teenage apathy. The cafeteria buzzed with energy, filtered through gossip, phone screens, and the chaotic rhythm of privilege unaware of its own weight. Malik entered unnoticed, as usual, sliding into the corner table he always chose, furthest from the loudest groups, nearest to the exit. He unwrapped his sandwich, flipped open a dog-eared copy of The Art of War, and began reading between bites. To most, he was just background noise, a figure so unassuming it disappeared in plain sight. But to Preston Vale and his entourage, Malik was the final piece in a game they had been setting up for weeks. Brittany had been the one to suggest it first, in a half-whispered conversation laced with cruelty and boredom. "You know what would go viral?" she mused, sipping on her overpriced oat latte while scrolling through dance challenges. "Getting that silent scholarship dude to flip out on camera. Like, push him hard enough, and film it when he snaps. Then you can act like you were just joking, and he'll look crazy. Instant content." Preston grinned, the kind that never reached his eyes, and the plan was born, not out of hate, but out of indifference, which was worse. Malik wasn't seen as a person. He was a prop in a prank. The lunchroom was already half-watching when Preston swaggered over, phone in his back pocket recording from the start. He didn't speak at first. He sat opposite Malik and stared. Malik glanced up once, then returned to his book. Preston snatched it from his hands and flipped through the pages. "What's this? How to be a loser for dummies?" He laughed, tossing the book to the ground. Malik bent down silently to retrieve it, brushing crumbs off the cover with care. The table behind them was full of whispering onlookers, cameras angled subtly. Brittany was filming too, holding her phone low but angled just right, her face lit with glee like she was directing a live drama. When Malik didn't respond, Preston escalated. "Come on, say something, man. What? Cat got your throat? Or are you afraid of what might come out if you open it?" No reaction. So Preston stood, slow and dramatic, towering over Malik. He reached across the table, grabbed Malik's tray, and launched it onto the floor. Milk, spaghetti, apple slices, all splattered across Malik's shoes. The cafeteria gasped. Phones tilted higher. Still, Malik didn't move. Until Preston made one mistake too many. He shoved Malik hard. Not a joke shove, not a theatrical one, but real force, designed to elicit a response. Malik's chair scraped backward as he stumbled, catching himself against a bench. He stood straight, the noise of the room dulling into a low thrum in his ears. Something shifted behind his eyes. A line had been crossed. No more warnings. No more restraint. He stepped forward, not lunging, not yelling, but like someone answering a bell only he could hear. Preston barely had time to process what came next. Malik's foot swept the floor with surgical precision, knocking Preston off balance. As Preston flailed, Malik twisted, catching him mid-fall with a fluid, judo-inspired throw that slammed him onto his back without so much as a bruise to Malik's own hands. Silence punched through the cafeteria. Then came the moan. Preston, winded, clutching his side, stunned at how fast it had happened. Malik didn't linger. He didn't pose. He turned and walked away like he had just closed a locker, not flattened the school's most privileged bully. That's when chaos erupted. Phones shot upward. Brittany screamed. A lunch aide called security. But the fight was over before authority arrived. The footage spread like brush fire. Within 2 hours, it hit TikTok's For You page. By evening, it was trending on YouTube with titles like "Scholarship Kid Destroys Rich Jock in One Move" and "He Tried the Wrong One." Comments flooded in, some praising Malik's discipline, others crying over reverse bullying, some just watching in awe. But beyond the hashtags and GIFs, something bigger was happening. People were beginning to ask who Malik was. The school reacted in damage control. Preston's father demanded expulsion, crying that his son was a victim of targeted violence. Brittany posted a tearful video that backfired, showing her gloating before the shove. The administration released a statement about student safety, suspended both boys pending investigation, and quietly began preparing a case to revoke Malik's scholarship. But they had underestimated one thing. People had seen the full video. The calm. The restraint. The push. And only then, the response. It wasn't rage. It was a reaction. And that distinction mattered. Malik, meanwhile, didn't return home immediately. After the fight, he walked 3 miles to a small gym tucked between a liquor store and a church. Inside, the dim lights buzzed as he wrapped his hands and struck a heavy bag with quiet precision. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed, in them, in himself, in how easily they had dragged him out of stillness. He hadn't wanted the attention. But now he had it. And attention was a double-edged sword. As he hit the bag, the echo of his grandfather's voice whispered, "You stepped into the light, Malik. Now make sure you know what to do with it." Because this wasn't just about a school fight anymore. It was about the myth of power, who was allowed to hold it, and who was punished for using it. The Monday after the fight was unlike anything Westbrook Academy had ever seen. There were no morning announcements, no polite greetings in the hallway. Just the silence of a battlefield before the first gunshot. Students clutched phones like relics, playing the video again and again, mouths moving without sound, eyes wide with disbelief. Malik's name was everywhere, on group chats, Reddit threads, even local news tickers. Silent student shocks elite school, one headline read. Another called him the calm storm. The admin board tried to spin the narrative as an unfortunate escalation, but the footage refused to be forgotten. In it, Malik wasn't the aggressor. He was the answer to a question no one had dared ask aloud. What happens when the outsider stops walking away? By Tuesday, national attention had arrived. Sports networks replayed the clip between segments. A former UFC champion tweeted, "Kid's got balance, timing, and control. Who trained him?" Malik, unaware at first, sat quietly at home while the world reshaped his story without asking permission. Liana watched the news with folded arms, concern wrinkling her forehead. Russell stayed mostly silent, but even he admitted, "The door's open now. What you walk through it for, that's up to you." Malik wasn't suspended anymore, he was on administrative leave, a term the school used to avoid taking a public stance. But everyone knew what it really meant. The school didn't know what to do with a student they couldn't frame as a problem. That week, Malik received more messages than in the past 2 years combined. DMs flooded in. Students who had never spoken to him offered support. Coaches from local fight gyms reached out. Then came the big one, an offer from a semi-professional MMA circuit. A manager named Rick Draven emailed with the subject line, "You're not just a fighter. You're a phenomenon." He offered a training contract, a social media team, even a brand sponsorship. "We can have you in the ring by summer," he wrote. "You'll be a legend by senior year." The offer was tempting, almost surreal. Malik stared at the email for hours, reading each word like it might change between blinks. He printed it out and left it on Russell's desk without a word. Russell didn't react immediately. The next morning, they trained together like usual. No music, just the rhythmic strike of gloves against pads. Afterward, Russell sat on the bench and finally spoke. "You want to be a fighter, Malik? Then fight. But know what you're fighting for. If you chase the fame, it'll own you. If you chase the fight, you better make peace with pain." Malik nodded, understanding but not answering. The pressure was mounting. Every decision now came with consequence. Stay at Westbrook and be the reminder of their failure, or leave and become something he hadn't planned to be. A symbol. A target. A spectacle. Meanwhile, the school launched its own quiet campaign. They invited Malik in for a restorative justice session, trying to coax him into publicly forgiving Preston for mutual misunderstanding. The offer was a trap, cloaked in virtue. Malik refused. Rumors swirled that a private donor, Preston's father, was threatening to pull funding if Malik wasn't expelled. Simultaneously, videos emerged of Preston in a neck brace, paraded on camera like a martyr. It was all theater, carefully staged. But it backfired. One student posted, "He got folded like laundry and now he's the victim." It went viral again. The school's image was cracking. At home, things weren't calm either. Liana was receiving calls from hospital administrators urging her to counsel your son on the importance of reputation. Malik's old neighborhood saw him differently now. Kids called him the shadow. Local teens begged to train with him. His phone buzzed constantly with invitations to podcasts, school assemblies, interviews. One morning, he found a brand new pair of sneakers on his porch with a note, "From one fighter to another, keep your stance strong. JD." He never found out who JD was. But he wore those sneakers to school when he finally returned. The walk through Westbrook's front gates was slower than before. All eyes turned. Some widened. Some narrowed. But no one laughed. Not a single person spoke. It wasn't fear, it was realization. Malik had changed the balance. He wasn't a background character anymore. He was the main event, the shift in the story everyone thought they understood. But Malik didn't speak to anyone. He walked straight to the principal's office, where a counselor waited with a practiced smile and a stack of pamphlets about managing fame and trauma. Malik flipped through them silently, then said one thing before walking out: "You were all watching before it went viral. You just didn't care." By Thursday, the MMA offer sat unanswered in his inbox. Malik stood at the edge of a decision that could define him. He didn't want to be a weapon, didn't want to become another story of talent exploited and discarded. But he couldn't go back to being invisible, either. The viral fame hadn't made him, it had revealed him. And now, he had to choose whether to embrace the image the world saw, or fight to reshape it into something of his own making. The school wanted silence again. The internet wanted blood. But Malik, he wanted something different. Something still forming, just beneath the surface of all the noise. He didn't know what it was yet. But he knew one thing: he wouldn't let anyone else decide it for him. A week after Malik's return to school, just as the dust began to settle and the stares softened into whispers, a storm broke open that no one could have predicted. It started not in a classroom, but in the cluttered office of Ms. Harrow, the school's most underappreciated staff member. She wasn't a teacher or administrator, just the tech room supervisor, the kind of person who fixed projector remotes and replaced cracked tablet screens. She had watched the events unfold from the shadows, never voicing her opinion, always silently observing. But one afternoon, while organizing backup footage from cafeteria security cameras, she found something that made her heart race. A hidden file. An audio file mislabeled as supplies_inventory.mp3. When she clicked on it, what played wasn't an inventory list. It was a conversation, recorded days before the incident. A conversation that made everything clearer and much, much darker. In the recording, Preston's voice came through first, smug, unfiltered. Just get him to react. One little freakout and he's done. That scholarship's tied to conduct, right? Brittany's laugh followed, sharper than usual. "You're terrible," she purred. "But you're not wrong. Plus, Daddy said he'd double the donation if we clean up the optics around here." Then another voice chimed in, one that chilled Ms. Harrow's blood. "Mr. Camden. Assistant Principal. Just don't leave marks. We need plausible deniability. If he touches you, we can classify it as aggression. And then it's bye-bye tuition." The file ended with the clink of a glass, laughter echoing. Ms. Harrow sat frozen, replaying the clip. Over and over. She knew what she had. She also knew what it meant. This wasn't bullying, it was a setup. A deliberate attempt to bait Malik into violence and remove him under the guise of policy. And the worst part? It went higher than just spoiled kids. It had institutional fingerprints. She printed the transcript, backed up the audio to 2 different flash drives, and locked one in her glove compartment. The other, she mailed anonymously. To Malik. He received the package 3 days later, slipped under the front door in a plain envelope. No note. Just a USB stick and a printed transcript. At first, he thought it was a prank. Then he read it. And then he listened. Once. Twice. 5 times. Each word unraveling the last shred of doubt he had about what had happened. This wasn't just cruelty. It was calculated. Preston hadn't been reckless, he'd been strategic. Brittany hadn't filmed for clout, she'd filmed for evidence. And Mr. Camden, the man who had smiled through so many parent-teacher nights, was pulling strings behind it all. Rage wasn't what Malik felt. It was betrayal. Cold and precise. Russell listened too, nodding slowly, face unreadable. They played chess with you, he said. Problem is, they thought you were a pawn. Liana cried in the kitchen, torn between calling a lawyer and marching into the school herself. Malik did neither. He waited. He waited until the next student council assembly, a monthly spectacle where Westbrook flaunted its diversity and community values in front of board members. Malik signed up to give a speech. He told no one what he planned. The auditorium was full that morning. Parents, students, teachers, board members. Even a local news anchor was present, invited to cover the school's progressive leadership initiatives. Malik stepped up to the podium in a black button-down shirt, his hands calm, his voice clear. He began by talking about silence. About what it means to swallow injustice. About how discipline can be mistaken for weakness. Then he pivoted. But silence doesn't mean ignorance, he said. And restraint is not submission. He paused. Some of you here tried to remove me. Not for breaking the rules, but for refusing to be broken by them. He reached into his pocket and placed a flash drive on the podium. I've already shared this with legal counsel, the press, and the Board of Ethics. But I thought the students should hear it first. He walked off stage without playing the file. He didn't need to. By the time he reached the back doors, dozens of phones were already scanning the QR code he left taped to the front row seat. It led to a cloud drive containing the audio file, the transcript, and a short message. You tried to frame me. Now frame this. The fallout was immediate. Mr. Camden was placed on leave that afternoon. Brittany's social accounts went dark. Preston's father pulled his funding, but not before threatening to sue the school for mishandling student safety. The administration scrambled. Statements were drafted. Investigations launched. But none of it mattered. Because the truth was out. And it didn't belong to them anymore. The internet erupted again, this time with righteous fury. Malik wasn't just the quiet kid who could fight. He was the kid who had been hunted, framed, and still stood tall. People made documentaries. Sports outlets dug deeper. Malik became the symbol of calm strength in the face of institutional abuse. He didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He trained harder. He turned down interviews. But behind the scenes, he met with attorneys. Quietly, respectfully. Not to sue. But to demand structural change, more oversight, better scholarship protections, mandatory ethics training for staff. Some called it a revolution. Malik just called it balance. Still, one question lingered. Who had sent the recording? He never found out. Ms. Harrow never revealed herself. But every time she passed him in the hallway afterward, she gave him a small nod. The kind shared between soldiers in different wars. Malik always nodded back. When Malik stepped back onto the mats of Russell's basement gym, months after the scandal broke, the world outside had already crowned him a hero. News anchors called him a symbol. Commentators praised his composure, his strength, his message. College recruiters, brand scouts, and sports agents sent offers daily. But Malik ignored them all. The fame had come fast, loud, and wild, but it wasn't what he sought. He returned to the silence. To the rhythm of training. To the raw breath that came before a strike and the stillness that followed it. Fame hadn't made him stronger. It had just revealed where his strength came from. And now, he was finally ready to use it on his own terms. Westbrook Academy underwent a quiet reckoning. The assistant principal never returned. Preston was quietly transferred to another private school in a neighboring state. Brittany disappeared from social media, and rumor had it her family moved entirely after sponsors pulled out of several endorsement deals linked to her family's name. The board instituted new policy reforms, including an anonymous reporting system, racial bias training, and an independent ethics committee for scholarship cases. They never publicly acknowledged Malik by name in the announcements. But the students knew. The staff knew. Even the walls of Westbrook knew. They had been changed by the boy who refused to remain silent. Malik declined the school's offer to return full-time. He finished his remaining classes through independent study, coming in only for exams. On the day of graduation, he arrived unannounced, slipping into his gown without fanfare. His name was called near the end of the list. As he crossed the stage, there were no cheers, just a beat of silence, followed by a single person clapping. Then another. Then the whole auditorium. Even the principal, who once dodged his mother's calls, rose slowly to his feet. Malik accepted his diploma with a simple nod, then walked offstage and out the back door. He didn't stay for the rest of the ceremony. That summer, another video went viral, but this one wasn't shaky phone footage from a school cafeteria. It was a clean, high-definition promo from a well-respected youth martial arts league. The screen faded from black to a single line, "Silence speaks loudest when backed by skill." Then came a clip, Malik, in a sleeveless rash guard, standing in the middle of an octagon-shaped mat, hands steady, face composed. His opponent moved first, fast, aggressive. Malik countered, fluid and controlled, taking him down in 2 swift motions. The crowd erupted. Not because he was brutal. Because he was beautiful to watch. Precision, power, peace. All wrapped into a form that defied his age. The league didn't exploit his story. They let him shape it. He didn't fight for fame. He fought for discipline. For focus. For something deeper than views or applause. When interviewers asked about Westbrook, he always smiled politely and said, "That's behind me." When they asked about Preston, he said nothing at all. But those who knew him, those from his neighborhood, from the gym, from the teachers who watched quietly from the sidelines, understood what he'd done. He had rewritten the ending they planned for him. He'd taken the punch meant to silence him and turned it into a platform no one could touch. Russell stood by him through it all, sometimes just watching, sometimes correcting his form with a grunt and a shake of the head. He never called him a prodigy. Never treated him like a celebrity. Just a boy who'd earned every inch of his strength. Liana, too, stood taller now, no longer fielding threatening calls from administrators, but receiving thank you letters from other parents who saw their children differently because of Malik. She kept every one of those letters in a showbox under her bed. And yet, even with all this change, Malik remained elusive. He wasn't flashy. He didn't buy cars or post shirtless mirror selfies or endorse energy drinks. He trained, he studied, he meditated. He returned to the community center once a week, teaching kids as young as 5 how to breathe before they punched, how to listen before they leapt. Discipline first, he always said. Then the rest will follow. The boys loved him. The girls, too. He never raised his voice. He never needed to. But not everything was healed. Some wounds remain beneath the surface. The systems that tried to erase him weren't dismantled, they were just exposed. Malik knew this. That's why he kept training. Why he stayed ready. Not for revenge, but for resistance. For the next time someone tried to bury the truth beneath polished tiles and smiling faces. Because he understood now that every fight wasn't just about fists. Sometimes, it was about endurance. About holding your ground until the world is forced to shift. And perhaps that's why, one autumn evening, a new clip began making rounds online. Silent, raw, and unexplained. Malik, standing in a gym with no logos, no crowds, no music. Just him and a heavy bag. He throws a single punch. The bag sways. The camera lingers on his face. No anger. No pride. Just stillness. The caption reads, "Strength isn't what you show. It's what you control." No one knew who posted it. No one knew who filmed it. But within hours, it had millions of views. Because people knew that face. That calm. That silence.